The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Cedar Ridge. As Clara Whitmore stood before Judge Harlan's desk, her black morning dress looked like a bruise against the faded wood walls of the courthouse. 3 weeks had passed since they buried Sheriff Thomas Whitmore, and already the town's patience for her grief was gone. "Mrs. Whitmore," Judge Harlan said, his tone heavy with finality, "the law is clear. A woman cannot hold property without a male guardian. Your late husband's land reverts to the territory unless you remarry within the month." Clara's gloved hands tightened on her reticule. "Judge Harlan, surely there must be." "There isn't. He didn't even look up from his papers. The county needs that land productive, not sitting idle while you mourn. The council has already found you a suitable match." The door creaked open behind her, and heavy boots echoed across the wooden floor. Clara didn't turn. The silence in the room told her everything she needed to know. Eli Danner. She'd seen him before. Everyone in Cedar Ridge had. The silent cowboy who'd worked for her husband, tall and broad-shouldered, with eyes the color of winter sky and a face that rarely changed expression. A man who kept to himself, who carried his past like a shadow. "Mr. Danner has agreed to the arrangement," the judge continued. "He's a man of property now. Your late husband left him 40 acres in his will. Combined with your holdings, it'll make a respectable spread." Clara finally turned to face the man she was being forced to marry. Eli stood near the door, hat in hand, dark hair falling across his forehead. A thin scar ran from his temple to his jaw, a pale reminder of violence past. His clothes were clean but worn, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met for the briefest moment. His revealed nothing, no anger, no pity, no interest. She wondered if her own face betrayed the fear and resentment clawing inside her. "I don't require a husband," she said, though she knew the words were useless. "I can manage the ranch myself." "No, you can't." The new voice came from the back. Reverend Peyton, his tone dripping with false concern. "It's improper. A young woman alone on that property. People will talk." Clara's spine stiffened. "Let them talk." "They already do," the Reverend said smoothly. "They whisper about why the sheriff was out that night, why he was alone when the Wallace gang found him." The accusation hit her like a slap. "How dare you suggest?" "I suggest nothing," Peyton interrupted, raising a hand. "But a proper marriage will silence such gossip. Mr. Danner is willing. You should be grateful." Grateful, the word tasted like dust. She looked again at Eli. He hadn't moved or spoken. Did he want this any more than she did? Or was he simply obeying orders as he'd always done for Thomas? "When?" she asked quietly. "Tomorrow morning," Judge Harlan said. 10 o'clock. Just a simple ceremony. No need for anything elaborate given the circumstances. The circumstances. Her husband murdered, her reputation questioned, her future decided by men who saw her as property to be passed along. Clara's jaw tightened. "Fine," she said, "but I have conditions." The judge raised a brow. "You're hardly in a position to negotiate, Mrs. Whitmore." Nevertheless, she turned to Eli. "I'll need to speak with Mr. Danner privately." For the first time, Eli moved. "Outside," he said, his voice low and rough, like gravel sliding down a riverbed. She nodded, lifting her chin as she followed him out into the blinding sunlight. Every eye in town watched as the widow and the cowboy walked side by side toward the water trough outside Morrison's General Store. News would spread before the hour was out. Eli leaned against the hitching post, arms crossed, the brim of his hat shading his face. Up close, she saw the years carved into his features. Not old, perhaps 35, but worn by wind, sun, and silence. "You don't want this," she said. "Neither do you." His tone was flat, factual. "Then why agree?" He was quiet a long moment, staring at the horizon where the prairie shimmered under heat. "I owed your husband. He gave me work when no one else would. Didn't ask about my past. This is how I pay that debt. By marrying his widow? By keeping you safe." Something in the way he said it made her heartbeat quicken. He went on. "Tom worried near the end. Said the Wallace gang was getting bold again. He made me promise." Clara frowned. "Promise what?" "To look after you if something happened." The words hollowed her chest. "He never told me." He didn't want to worry you." They stood in silence for a moment, the only sound, the distant cry of a hawk and the creak of the windmill. "My conditions are simple," Clara said finally. "This will be a marriage in name only. You'll have your room, I'll have mine. I'll keep house, you'll work the land. We'll be business partners. Nothing more." Eli nodded once. "Fair enough." "And I won't be treated as property," she added. "I may have to marry you by law, but I won't be owned." Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe. "I don't own things that can think for themselves, Mrs. Whitmore." She extended her hand. After a moment, he took it. His palm was calloused, his grip firm but not crushing. "Tomorrow, then." "Tomorrow?" She turned to leave, then paused. "Why do they fear you, Mr. Danner? The townspeople?" His gaze drifted past her to the endless horizon. "Because they're smart enough to fear what they don't understand." It wasn't an answer, not really, but she let it go. Tomorrow she'd marry a stranger, a man with shadows behind his eyes, and a scar that whispered of things better left unspoken. That night, the house felt emptier than ever. Thomas's pipe still sat by the hearth, his chair unmoved. Clara touched it gently before lighting a single lamp. She told herself she wasn't crying, just tired. But when she found his old journal and read the last page, the tears came anyway. Eli Danner is a good man. Despite what folks say, if anything happens to me, he'll do right by Clara. I've made sure of it. Clara closed the book and pressed it to her heart. "Oh, Thomas," she whispered, "even now, you're trying to protect me." Quote. Outside, the wind moaned across the prairie, and in its lonely song she thought she heard her future calling, rough-voiced, quiet, and burdened with secrets. Tomorrow would come soon enough. Tomorrow she'd become Mrs. Danner. The wedding ring felt foreign on Clara's hand as she stood at Morrison's counter, waiting for him to wrap her flower. 2 weeks had passed since the quiet ceremony that bound her to Eli Danner. 2 weeks since Judge Harlan's clipped blessing and Reverend Peyton's pious smile. If one could call that joyless exchange a ceremony at all. Now she wore the name Mrs. Danner like an ill-fitting coat, neither comfortable nor entirely hers. "That'll be $2, Mrs. Danner," Morrison said, his tone carrying just enough sharpness to remind her he didn't approve. Behind her, she heard the whisper of skirts and the hiss of a name spoken too loud to be accident. Mrs. Hutchkins and her companion, 2 women who could turn gossip into currency. "Shameful," one murmured, "so soon after the funeral." Clara placed the coins on the counter without flinching. "Thank you, Mr. Morrison." He bagged the flour. "Heard your new husband's been keeping to himself out at the ranch. Man needs to be social, part of the community, unless he's got reasons for hiding." Clara met his gaze squarely. "Mr. Danner is working. The ranch requires attention." Before Morrison could answer, Mrs. Hutchkins' voice cut through the air, dripping false sympathy. "Such a tragedy about dear Sheriff Whitmore. Everyone trusted him completely. Unlike your current husband, of course." Clara gathered her packages and said, "Good day, ladies." She'd made it halfway to the door when Mrs. Hutchkins called after her. "Some say it's curious, don't they? A woman losing one husband to violence and marrying another so quick. Makes folks wonder what really happened out on that road." Clara's back went rigid, but she didn't turn. She stepped out into the harsh sunlight, her packages clutched to her chest like armor. The wind kicked dust down the street, and in every window she felt eyes following her. She was halfway to her horse when a shout split the afternoon. "Stay away from there, Danner!" Big Jim Sawyer came stumbling out of the saloon, blood streaming from his nose. Through the open doors stepped Eli, broad, calm, his shirt untorn and his face unreadable. He didn't look at Big Jim, who was still yelling from across the street. "That woman don't need your kind sniffing around." Clara froze. The words, the implication, hit her like a blow. Eli's gaze found hers then. For a heartbeat, something raw flashed in his eyes, something that made her forget the onlookers, the whispers, the dust swirling around them. He tipped his hat slightly, a polite gesture that somehow felt intimate, then turned and walked toward the livery stable. "That's your husband now?" someone muttered nearby. The killer McCready brought to town. Clara mounted her horse without a word. She rode home, back straight, ignoring the weight of their stares. The 5-mile ride gave her too much time to think. What had Big Jim meant? What had he said to Eli before the fight? When she reached the ranch, the house stood quiet and empty. No smoke from the chimney, no sound from the barn. His horse was already in the corral, but he was nowhere in sight. Clara unloaded her supplies, set a kettle on the stove, and tried to focus on routine. Cook, clean, keep moving. But every sound outside made her flinch. The sun had just begun to dip when the door opened. Eli stepped in, dust-covered, hat in hand. She noticed the tear in his shirt, the dark stain near his shoulder. "You're hurt," she said before she could stop herself. He glanced down, caught it on wire. "It's nothing. It needs cleaning. I can manage." "Sit." Her tone left no room for argument, and even he seemed surprised by it. After a pause, he sat. She brought water, whiskey, and clean cloths. "You'll need to remove your shirt." Eli hesitated, then began unbuttoning. When the fabric came free, Clara had to catch her breath. His chest and back were a map of scars, long white lines, and jagged marks that told stories no man should have to tell. "This wasn't from fence wire," she said quietly. No, he didn't look at her. Big Jim, he had friends, thought 3-on-1 might improve their odds. Did it? Quote. He met her eyes then. No. Clara cleaned the wound in silence, aware of how close they were, of the way he tensed under her touch but didn't pull away. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, his breath steady despite the sting of whiskey. "Why were they angry with you?" "Big Jim's been coming around the ranch when I'm not here," Eli said. "Checking on you," he said. "Making sure you're treated proper." Her stomach turned. "He has no right." "That's what I told him. And he disagreed. I convinced him otherwise." Clara tied off the bandage and stepped back. "I can handle Jim Sawyer." "Not if he brings friends." Eli stood, testing his arm. "There's a rifle in the barn, under the feed bins. Thomas kept it there. You know how to use it?" Quote. "Yes." "Keep it in the house." He left before she could reply. She ate supper alone, though she found herself listening for his footsteps. Later, when she carried a plate to his room, she found him writing at the desk, columns of figures, lists, neat handwriting. "You missed supper," she said, setting the plate down. "Didn't notice." She saw the papers. "You're planning for winter." "Someone needs to." "Your husband was a good man, but not much of a rancher. Herds thin, fences need repair before the snow." "Thomas tried his best." "I know," Eli said softly. "But trying and doing are different things." "I don't know anything about ranching." "You'll learn. Will you teach me?" He looked at her for a long moment. "If you want to learn, yes." Clara nodded, then hesitated. "Eli, what Big Jim said about you being a killer." "It's true," he said simply. "I've killed men, some for money, some for survival." She absorbed that quietly. "But you're not that man anymore." "Am I not?" He gestured to his shoulder. "I put 3 men down today without reaching for my gun. Violence is what I know, Mrs. Danner. It's what I'm good at." "Then why stay? Why marry me if you think you're beyond saving?" Eli's gaze drifted to the lamp flame. "Maybe a man gets tired of being what he's good at. Maybe he wants to try being something else." Quote. "Like a farmer? Like someone worth saving?" Clara felt her heart twist. "Then we're both pretending to be something we're not," she said softly. "I'm pretending to be a ranch wife, and you're pretending to be a man who doesn't know violence." Eli smiled faintly, his first real smile. "Maybe if we pretend long enough, it'll start to feel real." Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the cracks of the old house. Clara turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Good night, Eli." He looked up, eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. "Good night, Clara." In her room, she lay awake long after the lamp burned out, listening to the steady rhythm of his footsteps in the other room. She wasn't sure what frightened her more, the danger that followed Eli Danner, or the way his quiet strength made her feel something she hadn't felt since Thomas died. Not fear, not pity, something alive, something she could almost mistake for hope. The first riders appeared at dawn, their shapes dark against the pale horizon. Clara spotted them from the kitchen window while preparing breakfast. Her pulse quickened as she counted 3, maybe 4 men, moving slow and deliberate. "Eli," she called, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. He was already there, stepping from the doorway fully dressed, boots on, gun belt buckled tight. It was as if he'd been waiting for this. His eyes followed her gaze out the window. When he spoke, his voice was calm and cold. "Get the rifle." Clara ran for the Winchester, the same one he'd told her to keep loaded behind the door. By the time she returned, Eli was strapping on a second revolver. "You know them?" she asked. "Maybe," he said. "Stay inside." "Eli, stay inside." He walked out onto the porch with a slow, unhurried gait that belied the tension coiled in his frame. Clara positioned herself by the window, rifle ready. The riders stopped at the gate. The man in front pushed back his hat, revealing a sun-hardened face that oozed trouble. "Well, well," he called. "Eli Danner, heard you'd gone respectable." Eli didn't move. "You're a long way from Texas, Wade." Following opportunity. Wade Garrison grinned, a grin that showed no warmth. "Heard about a sweet setup. A sheriff's widow, plenty of land. Couldn't believe it, till I saw it myself." "It's true," Eli said evenly. "Now move on." Wade laughed. "That any way to greet old friends? You forget Amarillo? The Fort Worth stage job? That was another life." "Was it?" Wade leaned forward in his saddle. "Because the way I remember, you owed us. We saved your hide in Laredo, and you ran off before we split the money. Some folks might call that stealing. Some might call it surviving." Wade's grin faded. "You don't walk away, Eli, you know that. Nobody leaves the life." "I did." Wade's gaze shifted to the house. "That her in there? The widow? Bet she don't know who she married." Eli's stance changed subtly. His hand rested near his holster. "She's got nothing to do with this." "She's got everything to do with it. A man like you don't go clean. You either die or get dragged back down." "You should leave," Eli said, his voice quiet but deadly. "Or what? You'll shoot me in front of your new wife?" Wade's eyes glinted with cruelty. "Show her what kind of man she's sleeping beside." Eli's voice didn't rise. "We're done here." Wade studied him for a moment, then smirked. "Maybe we are, for now. But this ain't over, Danner. You've got debts, and one way or another they get paid." He wheeled his horse and rode off, his men following. The sound of hooves faded into the distance, leaving only the wind. Clara waited until the last echo was gone before stepping outside. Eli stood on the porch, still as stone. "Old friends?" she asked quietly. "Old mistakes," he answered. "You should tell me." He looked at her, jaw clenched. 5 years ago I rode with Wade Garrison's gang. Robbed stages and banks. I was good at it, too good. Then in Laredo, it went bad. Rangers showed up. A little girl got caught in the crossfire. She died because of me." Clara's throat tightened. "You couldn't have known." "I pulled the trigger that started it," Eli said flatly. "That's all that matters. I left that night. Been trying to outrun it ever since." She hesitated, then stepped closer. "You left because it broke you. That means something." Eli's eyes flicked up, startled by the gentleness in her voice. "You think your husband saw it that way?" he asked. "I think he trusted you with my life," Clara said. "And now I understand why." They stood in silence, the wind tugging at her skirt. Finally, she asked, "Will Wade come back?" "Maybe," Eli said, "but next time he won't be talking." That night, the storm that had been building for days finally broke. Thunder rolled across the plains, lightning flashing against the dark sky. Clara was in the kitchen when the rain started. She'd just finished checking the windows when a shout cut through the storm. "Clara!" Eli burst through the door, soaked, his hat gone, his shirt clinging to him. "The fence line's down. Horses spooked. I need your help." She didn't hesitate. Together they ran to the barn, rain lashing their faces. The wind tore at her skirts, mud sucking at her boots. They worked side by side, shouting over the storm, driving the terrified animals back inside. By the time the last stall was secured, both were drenched and shivering. Inside the barn, lightning illuminated their faces. Clara was breathing hard, her hair plastered to her neck. Eli watched her, something fierce and unspoken burning behind his eyes. "You shouldn't have come out," he said. "I wasn't staying behind," she shot back. "Not while you fought this alone." Their eyes met. For a long moment, neither moved. Then, the space between them seemed to vanish. Eli reached out, brushing wet hair from her cheek. His hand lingered, rough thumb tracing her jaw. "You should hate me," he said quietly. "I tried," she whispered, "but I can't." The thunder cracked overhead and suddenly he was kissing her. It wasn't gentle. It was the kiss of a man who'd forgotten what warmth felt like, and a woman who'd forgotten how to be touched. Years of loneliness collided in that instant, the taste of rain, fear, and something deeper neither dared name. When they finally broke apart, both were trembling. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't." "Don't apologize." Clara's voice was steady. That was the first thing that's felt real since Thomas died. Eli exhaled, resting his forehead against hers. "This changes everything." "Maybe it should." He laughed softly, bitterly. "You don't know what you're asking." "Then show me," she said. For a heartbeat, the storm outside was the only sound. Then Eli kissed her again, slower this time, with aching tenderness. Later, when they returned to the house, they dried by the fire in silence. The world outside still howled, but inside there was peace, a fragile peace born of trust and something dangerously close to love. 3 nights later, the peace shattered. Gunfire tore through the dusk. Clara dropped the plate she was holding as Eli burst from the porch, gun drawn. "Inside, stay down," he barked. Through the window, she saw them. Men on horseback, faces masked. The Wallace gang, the same outlaws who'd murdered Thomas. Eli fired first, 2 quick shots. Clara grabbed the rifle, her pulse pounding. She could see them flanking the barn, moving to cut him off. She aimed, breathed, and fired. 1 man fell. Another ducked behind the corral fence. Eli was a blur, calm and deadly, every shot precise. But there were too many. Clara saw him stumble, clutch his arm. "Eli!" she screamed, firing again. Her shot found its mark. Then, silence. Smoke drifted over the yard. She ran outside, heart hammering. Eli stood among the fallen, blood on his sleeve, chest heaving. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "Not enough to stop me," he said, managing a faint smile. They turned as riders appeared on the ridge, men wearing badges. "Marshal Brennan," Eli called out. The marshal dismounted, taking in the scene. "Heard the Wallace gang was back. Looks like you took care of most of them yourself, Danner." "Not all," Eli said grimly. "Their leader's still out there." Brennan nodded. "We'll handle it from here. You two best get inside." Inside, Clara cleaned Eli's wound again, her hands trembling less than before. "You came back for me," she whispered. "I always will." When she finished bandaging him, he caught her wrist, pulling her closer. "Clara, when I thought I might lose you, I realized something." Quote. She looked up, eyes wet with tears. "What?" "That you're the only thing I've ever done right." Her breath hitched as he leaned forward, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "I love you," he said simply. Clara smiled through the tears. "Then you're not the only one learning to be something else." Outside, dawn began to break over the prairie, turning the world gold again. The land that had once been a place of loss was now something new. A home built not from law or duty, but from love earned the hard way. Clara Danner stood at the window watching the light spread across their ranch and whispered to herself, "We survived." And in the silence that followed, the prairie seemed to answer back. They had, and they always would.